You took one leap. You never touched the street. You landed on a sidewalk here and you put yourself against the side of the building to stop yourself from falling. He says, one leap. Now, he swore to it, and I don't remember.
It was all those Doug Fairbanks movies.
No, he said it.
That influenced you.
Whatever. Oh, I believe it could have been. I believe it happened because the other experience that happened to me that I'm ashamed to tell people because they look at me as if I'm nuts, but I know it happened, was that business of levitation. I don't know if levitation is true in anybody else's case, but in my case it worked. Because one time when I was running home in the rain from work, I was running down 16th Avenue and 86th Street in Benson Avenue. I lived the block away, and I had to cross Benson Avenue. As I got to the corner, I saw a puddle of water. The street was wet. And I jumped. And I hadn't realized how big that puddle was. It extended out halfway to the other, almost the middle of the street. Now that was a good 25 feet. I lifted myself as I was falling, and I actually lifted myself past that puddle. You're laughing, I'm nuts. It happened. I actually lifted myself an additional 6 or 7 feet. As I kept pulling it, and I remember it so vividly, and I know it's not untrue. You can think what you want. This is what happened to me. Now, when Johnny told me that I jumped from the pole, from the thing to the sidewalk, I'm not going to argue with the guy. He saw me. I know strange thing happened. I know of one incident on the trolleys. I was going up Fifth Avenue, and I observed my leader about 10 blocks away. And as I was operating the car, I kept my eye on him, and he wasn't moving. He was about 43rd Street and Fifth Avenue, opposite Sunset Park. And as I got close, I saw this guy, a black guy named Ray McKinney or something like that. He's getting out, he's pulling the pole, he's playing with the car, he's in the back, he's in the front, he's all around it. And finally, as I got near him, I saw he was on the side of the car playing with the ribbon fuse. Now, the ribbon fuse was a switch fuse. That's a fuse that if it blows, the car can't operate. It doesn't get the electricity from the wire to the motor of the car. And he's changing fuses. But his wire was up. His pole was up, touching the electric wire. So I very quietly went over and I pulled down the pole. I attached it to the holder, and I went around. I said, "What are you doing, Ray?" He says, "I'm putting in a new switch." He practically finished the job. I said, "Don't you think it's a good idea to pull down a pole?" And he fell on his ass right on the ground. I said, "I pulled it down." He said, "You pulled it down?" I said, "Yeah, while you were playing around there." He said, "Harold, I felt a tickle." Who knows why? In my own case, when I was a subway conductor, I had to pick up a train at Canal Street one day. They were laying in the middle tracks. And there's a sea beach line. I had a D-type train that you get in on the end, you climb up on it, there's a step, and then you step on the bar that connects you with trains, and I stepped right up into it. So I pulled myself up. I got up there, and the motorman was sitting on an end seat waiting for me. And he looks at me, and he's white. I said, "What's the matter?" I don't remember who it is. He says, "You just stepped on the third rail." I said, "Oh, my God." I had felt the tickle, too, when I grabbed the train. I know.
Sounds like the kind of job. One false move, and you're cooked.
You get so casual about it. The trains used to go up to Times Square on a BMT. We used to go up to Times Square. Every line went to Times Square. We go up the middle, and then come back again on the other side and go back to Brooklyn. In my case, a Brighton line or West End to Coney Island, whatever. We all used to go there. Now, this is in the morning rush hours, and you'd have maybe 8 minutes to go up the middle and come back again and get out of Times Square heading back to Brooklyn. So we used to relieve ourselves in the tunnel there while the motorman was walking from the front of the train to the back of the train. You have no idea how many guys would be taking a leak, hit the third rail with their urine and get knocked on their ass back into the car. The shock would come right up to them, hit them, and of course that would break the shock because the urine wouldn't flow anymore. There was no electricity current coming through. But it happened many, many, many times. Nobody ever got killed, but they sure had pains in the groins for a long time. I saw a lot of funny things. Funny, they're not funny, they're pathetic.
All right, we're on.
So what was the question before we were so rudely interrupted 7.5 years ago?
All right, first, what's today's date? Today is July?
Today is July 23rd.
July 23rd, 1991.
24th.
No, today's July 22nd.
No,
Today's July 22nd, 1991.
Sometime like that.
Right.
What time matter anymore?
22nd. All right. And I have, after watching the tape many months ago, I came up with a bunch of questions.
So give it to me.
That tie in to last time's interview. And the question is,
2 and 2 is 4.
no, the question is, in the last interview, the last episode, you mentioned that Mom and Pop were separated for a year.
For a year.
That's right.
We're separated on and off for years, for many years.
Oh.
All my life there was a separation. They only lived together. The longest stretch that I can ever remember was the year prior to your birth and maybe a year or two after your birth. And all the other times they were never together more than several months at a time.
Because the question I was going to ask originally I had down.
You want me to read the questions?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it'd be easier than my juggling around with this stuff, yeah. What does it say? What do I...
What year was it when they were separated for a year?
So
every year.
Okay, all right.
And how old was I? My age? Well, up until you were born, up until 13, really. Because you were born, I was only 12, a little over 12. They were separated always, constantly. For that reason, we moved several times. I went to a dozen different schools. I had no real home. On and off with different things. I don't know if in the first segment I told about the house on 13th Street where Pop used to entertain. Had any house we ever lived in, of course. I think I said we always had a piano. And this is the one that I remember best because I was a little boy then. I was 1924 it was. I was 23. So I was 5 or 6 years old. No, I was going to school. I had to be at least 6 years old. And he used to have people come to visit. And I remember that this was on 13th Street, just west of 2nd Avenue. And it was a brownstone. It was a house with a stoop on it. There were like, I guess, 8 apartments in the house. 2 on the first floor, 2 on the second, so forth. For 3 flights, 4 flights, maybe more, I don't know. So we lived on the first floor in the rear. And when you walk into the house, the first thing you got was a little vestibule, a kitchen in front of you, and on the right, alongside the small, very tiny kitchen, was a little living room or dining room because it had a table in it. And up against this wall was a piano, an upright piano. And then beyond it was a bedroom. That was it. That was the apartment.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt this for a second because right in the grass, right over here, there's a little rabbit. Whoops, it just ran away. Let me turn this off for a second. Okay, we saw the rabbit.
If you're stuffed for anything less than a wild rhino or a tiger, I'm getting up and I'm getting out of it.
Who are you kidding?
No, I love it. Go ahead.
All right. you mentioned that
Yeah,
after...
we're on 13th Street. And believe it or not, that's the house. I don't know if I mentioned this in the first thing about Pop being friendly with Jack Palmer, the guy that wrote Two Standards.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the house.
Okay, so it was with Jack Palmer.
Jack
But
Palmer.
how about Hines? Earl Father
Well,
Hines?
that's the place where Father Hines used to come. Pop was great with his left hand. At that time, left hand wasn't known. That was something new. And that's where Father Hines learned to use his left hand, with the other hand, doing the thing. And he used to play on Pop's piano. And the two of them would sit there, and Pop would show him, and he'd get down, he'd do it, and then Pop would do it, and he'd do it again. Now, Father Hines must have been, at that time, Earl Hines, he couldn't have been more than in his 20s. Well, so was Pop. At that time, Pop was only about 25 or 26. When I was born, he was only 20.
Right.
And that's it. Mom was 17. He was 19. No, when they were married, he was about 19. That's all.
Yeah.
When he died, I was 15, 16 years old, and he was 35, 36.
Right. Yeah.
So there's your answer.
You mentioned that when Mom and Pop separated, that you went to live with Aunt Rose.
Yeah.
So isn't that a little strange for you to live with the sister of the guy you just separated from? What was the relationship between Mom and...
were very, very close. They used to go out together a lot. They were buddy. And Pop was considered a black sheep because he was a drinker and he was a womanizer, and they felt that Mom was always right, which now, in retrospect, and I'm getting older, and my memory is better about my childhood than it was when I was younger. I don't know. I can understand Pop getting drunk a lot of times. Womanizing, well, that's something else. You do that whether you're drunk or not. But he did all those things, and Mom used to live with Rose, and I lived with Rose for a long time.
So was Pop the black sheep of that family, sort of, or?
Yes. He was the baby, and he was the black sheep. They all conceded that he was the smartest one in the family. To this very day, they all talk about how smart he was and what a shame that he wasted his brains on whatever. He's a drinker. He's a 2-quart a day man. His a day. And, well, Mom had no place else to go. Her own family didn't want her. She was a black sheep in her family because she married Pop.
Okay, hold it. I got to change the battery. Now we're ready.
Mom and Rose used to go out all the time.
Where'd they go?
Who the hell knows? Rose was no...
I'm asking these questions rhetorically.
You're asking questions that can't be answered. I was 10 years old.
Right.
I can only use my imagination. Use yours. Mom was no angel.
Right.
So very simple. Enough said. Ask another question.
Okay. What was, let's say you're about 12 or 13 or 14 years old.
Oh, the question you asked me about before. I meant you said something you were going to ask me about my visit with Pop to a cat house.
Right.
I never did do that with Pop. Pop never did that. When I was about 12 or so, 13, that's the time when they were living together. Shortly after your birth, Pop got me alone. He wanted to talk to me about girls. He said, I think, son, there's 2 things you should know about girls. I said, what are you going to do, Pop? Tell me about the birds and bees? I said, I've been fooling around with girls for a year already. He says, well, if you need any protection or anything, come to me. And that was it. That was the end of my education on women from my father.
Right.
But you mentioned about me going to a cat house with him. I said, no, I never went to a cat house with him, but I did go to his girlfriend's house with him, and I saw them in bed together. I guess this was long before I was 10. I must have been very young. I remember the woman's name was Frances. I remember they had a bed with big, big pillows, goose-down pillows. And it was a railroad.
Where was the apartment? You remember?
Down Lower East Side, Ludlow Street or Essex Street or something like that, in that area. That's where my father you know, he grew up in that area. And that's where his
Well,
girlfriend...
that's the Lower East Side, right? That's
Yeah, the Lower East
mostly
Side.
slums.
That's what today,
Okay.
the real slum.
What was it then?
It was the Lower East Side. It was predominantly Jewish, with the immigrants from Russia or Poland. That's what is predominant. There was,
Yeah,
there was
right.
very little of anything else then. There was no such thing as blacks or Puerto Ricans there or anything else that I can remember.
Right.
There might have been a few Italians, but that's it. There's
Yeah.
no other no other ethnic background.
Yeah.
But I remember that I remember is Pop being in bed with this woman.
Well, that...
I even think she had a child that I played with her at the time while I was in the sack. I don't remember.
Well, let me ask you, isn't that a little... I mean, where do you figure Pop was coming from at that time that he would bring his 10-year-old son to his girlfriend's house while he rolls in the hay with her?
It's quite possible. Well, I don't know because I don't remember. They might have been split up at the time, and he might have wanted me for the day. And then he got horny and he went to his girlfriend's house. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I know another time when they were split up, Pop took me for a day, was selling watermelons on a wagon with the horse and wagon. And we stood at the corner of Tompkins Street, by Tompkins Park on 10th Street and Avenue B, or A. And I remember him selling the watermelons there, and I was with him. How thrilled I was they let me see the horses for a little while.
Well, it's very funny because for all my life, I've had this memory, and I don't even know if it's real or not, of me on top of a wagon. Like with I don't remember whether it was you or Pop or somebody, but there was a horse and wagon, and I was on the wagon. Somebody was letting me be on the wagon with the horse. I have no idea whether that was...
I don't know either. I can't think of any time with me or you with Pop.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever happened with you and Pop.
Yeah,
Because when you were small, Pop, by that time, when Mom and Pop split up when you was a very little boy, he was already too sick to do anything.
Yeah, right.
He was a sick man.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that they split up, that they were together immediately before I was born and then immediately after.
Right.
But by immediately after, he was dying.
And that was the time when Hybarsky lived with us.
Yeah.
I was living with us. We lived on 17th Street in Avenue U over the Shoemakers. It's still there, by the way. I don't know if the Shoemakers, the house is still there.
Huh.
And the apartment is still there. Hy lived with us that time.
Avenue U is where?
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, right.
Yeah, Sheepshead Bay area.
Right.
And Hy and I slept in a folding bed, a day bed that we opened up. And you were in a crib in Mom's room, Pop's room. We remember, as a matter of fact, Hy might have the picture, I don't think I have, of you in a little bassinet. We used to put you out in a little area in between buildings where you get a little sunlight and air.
Yes.
And we didn't have to worry about you.
Yeah.
You were tiny. You were an infant.
Yeah.
It was good memories.
Well, it's interesting because that's also an era where you could put the kid in the carriage in front of the house and leave it and not have to worry.
That's right. That's right. Those were the days. You never had to worry about it then. It was a nice neighborhood too, and it still is. That area hasn't changed. It's predominantly Irish and Italian and Irish and Jewish, but well, what would be considered upper middle class.
Right.
It's residence. There's no big apartment houses in the area. It's all residential. And the last time I was there, which wasn't too long ago, I think last year, it was very nice. You could ride through it with your windows open. You weren't afraid of somebody reaching in to pull the chain off your neck. It's still a nice area. And that's the best. Those are the best years of my life. The 2 or 3 years that Mom and Pop were together. As a matter of fact, I can almost pinpoint the time because we got together when I was in the 8th grade in public school, and we stayed together. I guess for longer than 2 years because I graduated public school there. I went to high school for 2 years there, and then we moved to Harlem, and I changed to DeWitt Clinton High School, and it was in DeWitt that Mom and Pop separated again. That's when he got very sick. At that time, they already told us that he had 6 months to live, and he had given up the store. He got screwed out of the store, out of the bar.
How did that happen?
Family thing. I don't want to go into it because the family will see this eventually.
So what? It's history. We'll see it after everybody's dead. Come on, what happened? It's interesting.
Pop got into hock with the beer with one of the breweries.
Now, what year is this?
1935.
35. So I'm 3 years old, but that's
Yeah.
that. By that time, he's
Yeah.
dying. He's almost dead.
What's that?
By that time, he was almost
Yeah,
dead.
yeah.
Yeah.
1935. Well, I'm trying to think now. It's 35. Yeah, because I left school in I changed school in 1934. It was 1934.
Okay.
And he got into hock with the brewery, and they took over and sold it to somebody else. Just a strange coincidence. It happened to be Pop's sister's husband, Benny Rieger,
Okay.
who was a first-class SOB from way back.
Okay.
For that matter, so was his sister. And they took over, and they made very successful. My Pop had done good there, too. He was successful, except that he was getting sick at that time. He couldn't devote the time that he should have to the job. And who knows as well whether he would have devoted that time
Right.
to it. You know what I
Right.
mean? I don't know. I was only 14 at the time. And I know many times he and Mom would go away for a weekend, and leave me in charge of the bar. Luckily, he had a very, very good friend, a dear friend who he'd grown up with.
Was that
Who
legal?
came to help
But
him.
legally, they couldn't leave you in charge
What's
of the
that?
bar. Legally, they couldn't leave you in charge of the bar.
No, not legally. Well, as I told in the other segments about
Right.
the being picked up by the FBI woman, the federal woman,
Right.
that wasn't legal either. They got away with it. But anyway, he got sick at that time, and they started to fight again. And they split up, and Mom and I moved to the Bronx with you. And I don't know where Pop went. He went to college. I have no idea where. He went to school someplace, I presume. And we moved to the Bronx. We moved up to 170th Street, right off the Long Island Railroad track, on the west side of the Long Railroad. And it was a
No,
tenement house.
not the Long Island Railroad.
No, that's
Like Park Avenue? Or?
yeah, the Park Avenue. It's
Right, okay.
right just
Right.
west of Park Avenue.
Yeah.
And it was a lone house that went up 5 flights. We were on the 5th floor. And that's all it was, just that one house. Whatever had been alongside it was torn down. And it scared the crap out of me. I was always afraid to go up there. I thought the house was going to tumble over. The heavy wind was going to knock it over. And I never rested in that place. And this is when Pop was, by this time, Pop was very sick. And I don't know if I told him the other part about Pop dying and me going to visit Mom and everything, and the last thing Pop ever said to me. Is that familiar to
I
you?
don't remember now.
6 years ago since we started this thing. Well, anyway, we were in this apartment when Pop was very, very sick, and Mom took me to see him. Well, Mom, I went with Mom. By that time, I was 16, 17 years old. I went to see Mom, see Pop, and he was in Morrisania Hospital. Now, we went to see him on this day, and he was laying in the hospital with a sheet covering him entirely. And while I was watching, his feet started to twitch. And I looked at it, I was attracted by it, and he saw me look, he said, "You know what that is, son?" I know what, Pop. He says, "That's the pain." He says, "I don't feel nothing. I'm doped up to the eyeballs. I can't feel nothing." He says, "But that's what it is." He says, "You got me doped up." And strangely enough, poor bastard, he says to me, "Take my advice. Listen to your mother and everything you do. You'll be all right." The worst advice he ever gave me in his life was the last advice he ever gave me. And shortly after that, we stayed a while, and I put on Pop, and I kissed him, and we went away. The next day we moved from 170th Street to around the corner of 1416 Washington Avenue. Now, the moving took a day, and then another day went by, and on the third day I was going to go visit Pop. I went by myself, and prior to going to the hospital, I stopped off by Aunt Rose. When I went in the house, that was a 975 Walton Avenue. When I went into the house, the whole family was there. All my aunts and uncles who I hadn't seen in a long time. Grandpa was there, and I went, "Grandpa," and I went over and kissed him. "Hello," and I was very happy. And Rose looked at me, and everybody looked at me, and Rose said in Yiddish, which I understand, was, "He don't know his father's laying in his grave." I looked because I understood it. I said, what? Don't you know your father's dead and buried? And we couldn't find you? And that's how I found out that my father died.
Mm.
And I stayed there a short while, and I went away, and I never saw anybody in that family again. Maybe 15, 20 years. I never went around. I was ashamed to go around.
For that reason? 'Cause isn't that weird?
I was
Yeah.
embarrassed, humiliated, whatever. I don't know
God.
why. I just couldn't face them again
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
I felt I had done something very terrible.
Yeah, you were a kid. What the hell would you know?
In retrospect,
You did nothing.
I did nothing, but then it bothered me, and I was married and had children. And I don't even know how I got together with the family. I think it started when I was on a job, and I think I told a story about Danny Jacobson helping me.
Yes.
I went to Danny Weiss, who pushed me on to Danny Jacobson, who helped me.
Right.
Nothing was said about the past except how was I and everything else you
Right.
want to know about my family. And he got me back my job, which I had left for a year, and I had to get back immediately. And without his intervention, I would never have gotten back.
Mm.
And so Danny Jacobs is the one to whom I owe my being around this long.
Right.
But God knows I'd have been dead a long time ago if I hadn't gotten back to work on that nice cushy job with a pension and comparatively easy living. So what else? Did you cry?
When you're 12 or 13 or 14 years old.
We already went through all that period. We're up to the time when I'm with Matt Yoli. You got me married to Yoli. What is?
Oh, okay.
I'll
We
bet
want to
you
go
we'll keep
chronologically.
ourselves.
Okay, all right.
We were interrupted with my marriage to Yoli.
Oh, okay. So you're married to Yoli.
So I'm married to Yoli. Oh, that's enough.
Right.
Jesus. 52 years now. My God, what can I do?
Let me ask you, when you got married, when you first got married, what were you doing? How were you earning a living?
I was working for Stone Right Studios. I had a wonderful job. I met at that time, 1938, 39. It was 39 when I actually worked. 38 and 39. I was making $25 a week and working overtime. And when I worked overtime, if I stayed in my place during lunch hour or after work, they had food sent up to me from a very, very fine lounge. I used to get fresh turkey sandwiches and malted and whatever I wanted.
Right.
Just sign a bill, that was it. So, plus I was getting overtime for all this.
What were you doing there?
I was what they call a merchandise clerk. You sure I didn't cover this in the first thing?
You probably did, but this will be a little different spin.
Oh, it would be boring as hell.
No, well.
But we did work for Sears Roebuck and Montgomery Ward, all the stores with catalogs. And we would do photographs for them. We do the pictures for them. It was the largest place in the United States.
Right.
Stone Right Studios was the biggest place in the United States. And I was the merchandise clerk. If a garment had to be photographed, let's say, for a good reason, a girdle. I would get the girdle. The girdle would have a number, tell me this